Welcome to HFY Stories, where we journey through the cosmos reading one online tale at a time. Without further ado, let's get right into the story.
Thank you, Yoshi Man, for allowing us to narrate this story. Your daughter was a hero. Jiro could feel the warm tears of the shocked father splattered across his dress uniform, the midnight blue fabric elegantly deflecting every grief-stricken tear only to land against the metallic silver lining of the uniform. There were no words from the father, not even a faint cry or gasp, only a tightened grasp on Jiro's dress uniform as tears kept on pouring from the paralyzed father. In that, they were the same. Jiro was paralyzed through inaction, not knowing how to deal with emotions seeping through the father's silent grieving, while the father was paralyzed not knowing how to express his emotions to the chitinous giant in front of him. It just left the two of them in mutual understanding, one not knowing how to grieve and one not knowing how to comfort. It was the best situation Jiro could have hoped for, which left his companion to handle the weeping mother, the more reactive of the couple. Yet Thomas always had a way of handling such nuanced issues, always knowing the intricacies of people's emotions and state of mind. "I never thought it would be her," the mother wailed in a tear-stricken voice. I told her that she should have stayed out of the military, that she should have just gone anywhere else but there." Thomas placed his left hand onto the mother, softly wiping her tears with his other hand. "If it were not for your daughter's action, neither I nor dozens of other people would be here today," he said comfortingly, his every word carefully spun to convey his heartfelt sympathy. Yet the more he talked, the more Jiro's stomach turned and twisted in frustration, in knowledge that Thomas knew exactly what he was doing. "Have pride in your daughter's actions," Thomas compassionately exclaimed, glancing from the mother to the father with a sympathetic stare that Jiro could never imitate. She was one of the most selfless soldiers I have ever known, and it was an honor to serve beside her from start to end. Thomas took the mother's shaking hand, silently slipping a platinum-covered medal onto her lilac-colored hand. "Knowing Vitra, I know she wouldn't have wanted you two to weep over her death, but rather smile in honor of the daughter you raised." There was an unrivaled warmth in Thomas's voice, radiating a soothing yet charismatic charm that could calm a maddened beast, yet it only sought to hide the deceit in his words. Jiro wanted to speak, wanted to tell the truth, yet he knew that his resolute silence was better for them all. He never really had a way with words. That much was known to him. The eyes of the mother widened as she brought up the platinum core, its chromatic luminescence bringing a warmth across the couple's faces as they both put their hands on it, a remembrance to their lost daughter. There had been only one member of their squad who had been awarded such a distinguished medal, and that person was standing right beside him. Thomas nudged Jiro's arm, a silent request that they finish this up. In turn, he handed Thomas the jet-black urn that he had kept to his side, laced with thin streaks of gold layered in the form of the Commonwealth flag that had the name Vitra Fal Truva engraved on it. There were no words as Thomas soundlessly handed off the urn to the couple, who only spilt more tears as they hung onto the last vestiges of their daughter. "May the Entangler bless you well." Thomas took a step back and gave one final salute, his face stiffening against the shrapnel wounds that covered his face in a final show of respect for Vitra and her family. Jiro followed suit, taking a step away from the anguished couple to give the same respect, yet he was only met with a sympathetic stare by the couple. It was only when Thomas patted him on the shoulder did the realization strike him. It was an odd sensation to move your arm only for you to see nothing to come forward, where once two muscled chitin-covered limbs would have arisen to send off the grieving couple, only two empty sockets of his uniform came to bear. The couple gave one last nod to the duo as they slowly made their way out of the apartment flat, giving one last thank you as they closed their door. That just left them in the hallway. where a dozen other residents stood idly by, originally listening to the cries and commotion, now simply gazing at the duo as they silently made their way out of the apartment complex. After they got back in the spinner, there was no talking, only a mournful silence for those who had passed. Yet there was a burning sensation in Jiro's heart, one that told him that now was the time to speak out against the wrong that he had just let happen. It was only when they were stuck dead in traffic did he break the lull of silence. "You need to stop doing that!" "Doing what?" Thomas asked. He pointed towards the image crudely taped behind the steering wheel, the name Pullover Squad inscribed at the bottom of the picture where 16 men and women stood proudly, of all different species. All of them thinking that they were invincible. Lying. There was another moment of silence between the two of them. He knew that Thomas had heard him and had willingly ignored him, so he pushed forwards. "You and I both saw what happened to her," Jiro continued with a quelled accent of frustration. "She didn't even get out of the trench by the time the shell had hit." Jiro. Selfless? Heroic? Honorable? Thomas, if they ever look up the body cam footage, they'll break into two. Souls below the moment they realize that she was never awarded a platinum core, that it was all just a lie. I mentally cannot imagine the turmoil they would fall into. Even as Jiro kept on trying to elaborate on all the false claims and lies, Thomas kept on ignoring him, merely locking his eyes forwards as his posture slowly faltered against the seat. "Jiro, look. She cried for them, Thomas." He could see the memory play out in visceral detail, the desperate screams as she tried to stop her entrails from leaking out, his futile attempts to comfort her as he scrambled to cauterize the wounds under the hail of gunfire and shrapnel. Even as I tried to stem the bleeding, she wouldn't stop screaming for them, crying out for her mother and father, regretting everything. Jiro felt his voice envelop in a mix of sorrow and grievance, even as he tried to suppress his emotions. She didn't die a hero, Thomas. She didn't save anybody. She just kept on crying for them. "Damn it, I fucking know!" Thomas yelled as he smashed his fists against the steering wheel. Jiro could hear the stricken strain of his voice. I fucking know." Thomas's face was shrouded in a veil of anger and anguish, his every muscle tensed. Shining twinkles of teardrops started to emerge from the horizon of his fragmentation-dashed eyes. Jiro cursed himself for every tear that started to pour out his sparkling brown eyes. He knew that he had crossed that invisible line most aliens always had. Having spent so much time learning how to be sympathetic, it was a scornful reminder that he still had so much to learn about being empathetic. It truly was a pain to think logically when life was so illogical. Jiro was prepared for a rapturous outburst, a retaliation for his words, yet the longer he waited, the more he realized that Thomas wasn't angry at him. Vitra was one of the most arrogant, selfish little shit I have ever known, Thomas started to mumble, sniffling up the tears and mucus that had appeared on his face. "But she was our friend, damn it. And now she's gone. And the dead can't speak. Jiro thought back to all their memories before that fateful battle, the jokes, the banter, everything that added volume to the kinship they all shared with one another. It turned my heart when I smiled at them. It really did. All of the pretentious bullshit I fucking spewed, the sweet lies, the fake smile, everything. I knew what I was doing. I did it twice before, with Contra and Eka, something you evidently noticed. All the lies and deceit I was peddling." There was a faint chuckle as Thomas stared open widely at the cityscape above, tears still passing across his charcoal skin. Vitra would have called me out at the first sight of my smile. She could always see past my poker face and all my half-truths. But this is her parents we're talking to, not her. The people who spent years nurturing their daughter, watching her first step until she waved them goodbye to head off to wherever she went before she ended up in the army. He turned to look at Jiro, his voice still carrying a tear-soaked cadence. And now their daughter's dead. An urn to her legacy is the last thing they will ever have or see of her. He took in a deep breath as Jiro just somberly listened to his outpouring. I know it's hard to grasp onto the emotions of it all, but they were dying inside when I was comforting them. I could just tell. Their faces kept on crying out to be told that it wasn't all for nothing, that their daughter's life somehow went on to do something greater than any one of them could have achieved. Does that justify blatantly lying to them? He tried to voice the question as best as he could, trying not to worsen the streaks of tears on his friend's face. Jiro, people don't like the truth. It's cold, ruthless, and uncaring, Thomas said, a sense of guilt spilling in the way he turned to gaze at the tapped image. Yet people only know what they're told. So in a way, our lies become their truth because they won't know anything else. To say it straight, what we say about Vitra now will be how people remember her. There was another interlude of silence between the two, only the ambient hum of the spinner's repulsor lifts filling the emptiness. It was only after Jiro had put thought into everything that Thomas had said did he reignite the conversation. Would it have not been best if we just told them that their daughter was always thinking of them? That Vitra thought of them even in her final moments of life? Thomas let out a deep sigh as he slouched his head further against the seat. No, that would have been too much for them, he said in a sobering tone. Vitra never really talked about her parents, so maybe she had a falling out with them. Maybe they never got on with the best of terms. I tried talking to some of the others about it, but it turned up nothing new, so it was just better to play it safe. After another pensive moment of thought, Thomas's eyes lit up. You know what? Maybe one day, Jiro, maybe one day. But for now, Vitra's memory lives through our words, so it's up to us to do right by her. I still don't like it, Jiro said. To lie is to incur a debt on the truth. I fear that all of this may come tumbling down, just like it did on Ukar. Thomas seemed conflicted at his wording, turning his eyes back to the wider cityscape. If you died back there, just like Vitra did, nothing honorable or remarkable about your actions, how would you want the kids back at the orphanage to remember you? The question felt like a rugged piece of shrapnel penetrating his chest. How would you want Chen to see you? Or Tupapa? People who were our family? Wouldn't you want them to see you as a hero? Jiro was locked in his thoughts. His mind raced through all the logical possibilities and every desired outcome, only for it to all come undone when Thomas placed his hand on his shoulder. I know you take a lot of time to think about such things, but for me, I would want to be a symbol for them, have them think of my name and think of all the great things I had done. A legacy to aspire to and a story worth telling. A legacy to aspire to, he pondered the phrase, to leave a trail of actions that would be greater than his individual sum and in a way transcend the totality of death, like a book living on even as its author has long since passed. In the end, it all came down to how a person was remembered. Just like what Thomas was trying to accomplish. It was only then did he realize that there were tears trickling down his chitinous frame, not his, but rather Thomas's. He was still faintly crying, tears still trickling off his face as he regained posture in his face. Tears that somehow ended up on Jiro, yet every tear that splattered bled into his uniform. He didn't know why. The uniform was meant to be hydrophobic, yet the spots of fallen teardrops laid across the pristine blue fabric. Us humans have a thing called a white lie. Thomas stated, it's like a lie, but it's really not. It's still a lie. Yes, it still is. Thomas chuckled, wiping off the remaining trickles of tears from his face. But these white lies don't hurt people. They can comfort people, protect them. It's just how you use them. So your lies were white lies, meant to comfort and protect the grieving. Perfectly said Bud. If only Vitra could see you finally understanding basic emotional concepts. Jiro smiled at the mention. Vitra would have joked on and on how he was a cold, emotionless giant. Usually, he would get annoyed at such a comment, yet now he found it as a fond memory. If only she could... Their silence resumed for the remainder of their journey until Thomas once again tapped him on his shoulder. "We're here." Jiro looked out of the spinner. They were right beside one of the massive domed civic complexes that made up the old colonial part of the city. The rather lavish architecture and clothing adorned by passerbyers already told him that they were about to meet Io's family. He turned to see Thomas preparing himself for the inevitable, making sure that all his tears had been thoroughly wiped and that he looked presentable as possible. "How many more lies must we tell?" Jiro asked. He already knew the answer. They still had 3 more urns to deliver, 3 families who would collapse in anguish as they realized that their children were no longer amongst the living. Thomas patted Jiro on the back. "Let me do the white lies. Just look pretty and comfort them." As the 2 of them got out, he could already feel the eyes of passing bystanders lock onto them. They all knew what it meant. Their dress uniforms were that of privates, not officers, which meant only one thing to whomever they were meeting. Yet Jiro's eyes suddenly locked onto one pair, an elegantly dressed pair of wecha holding a single bag of groceries, a pair that now stood paralyzed to a muscle as they stared at the approaching uniformed duo. It was as if the spirits had concocted against him and Thomas to meet Io's parents at all places, yet he and Thomas marched forward, maintaining a stoic appearance as every passerby seemed to freeze and look at them. He could see the shock and panic sweep their faces, a muted thud coming from the dropped bag of groceries. He could feel the crowd suddenly lock their eyes at the urn beside Jiro's uniform, sudden gasps and murmurs erupting from the rapid formation of bystanders. Just look pretty and comfort them. As they walked closer, the realization only deepened in the couple's faces. The twinkle of tears started to form before they had even spoken to them. "Let me do the white lies," Thomas, in a stoic, soothing voice, began. "Ma'am and sir—" Just one more white lie, he told himself. The tears started to pour out of the couple's eyes. Just one more white lie.